Kyle Klingman with Track Wrestling, and what a honor to be able to have 2000 NCAA champion Brett Motter. And I've been saying it wrong for a little while. I probably said it right at one point, and then I changed back to Matter, and now I'm full board on Brett Motter. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate this time.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
So your career, man, you went to Penn, and your dad was a two-timer at Penn State. I would think there'd be a little pressure there to go to Penn State. Why'd you choose Penn?
It's a good question. Very fair question. I was very close to Penn State, actually. I mean, it basically came down to those two schools, and I kind of view that as a defining point of my life in a lot of ways, because I mean, I think on one hand, I had a full ride offered to me to go to Penn State, which was my father's alma mater. He was obviously a very successful wrestler there. I knew all the coaches since when I was little. My dad at one point was a coach at Penn State. I knew a bunch of the wrestlers that were on the team just for going through the recruiting process and having gone to a number of their summer camps and whatnot. So it was definitely very appealing, because it's obviously Big Ten school, and full ride's a good thing. But I remember specifically after getting the full ride, feeling pretty good about myself, and then my dad looked at me square in the eye and said, "Brett, if you get into the Wharton School of Business, we're going to figure this out," which was a really powerful thing, honestly, because I mean, obviously a big part of, I lived close to Penn. I knew all the wrestlers at Penn because my brother, who was a huge influence on my wrestling career and life in general, was at Penn. So the idea of wrestling with him was exciting as well. And then I just think the Wharton School of Business, I think, kind of opens a lot of doors. That I'm not saying that Penn State doesn't, but I just think it's a very powerful thing to have a degree from the Wharton School of Business. And also, it was pretty clear to me that I could accomplish what I wanted to on the mat as well. Like, it wasn't, I wanted to win an NCAA title. That was my goal. And I saw a path forward to that. I thought the coaching staff, I think, was fantastic. And again, I knew a bunch of the guys. I knew the entire team, actually. I mean, I had been hanging around them for the prior 2 years because of Clint, my brother.
When you think about your path, it seems like the traditional path of what I would visualize during that time is you don't place as a freshman, round of 12 as a sophomore, fifth place as a junior, and you win it as a senior. It seemed like that was what you did. Your best year was supposed to be your senior year. Did you feel like you just incrementally improved as you went along?
I suppose that's fair. I think my sophomore year I should have placed. My freshman year I could have placed even. I mean, I've actually recently gone back and watched those videos, and I was very close to winning. I think I was 2 matches away, but I should have won the match I lost in the wrestlebacks, which would have put me in the blood round, and I think I could have won that. I mean, not to relive old glories or repick scabs or whatnot, but I mean, I think my progression throughout the 5 years was very apparent to me. I think I got smarter. I think Coach Reyna and the coaching, like Coach Reyna in particular, I mean, he always had me on a path, right? I mean, it was very clear what he wanted me to do and kind of the progression of everything. So it was, while it was disappointing as a sophomore to not place, we were always moving forward and kind of figuring out what I should be doing to be getting better. And then, yeah, I mean, I think with anything, if you continue to train intelligently and continue to push yourself, I think the workout partners I had continued to get better and better, and the program just continued to progress from the point I started really paying attention to Penn Wrestling was when my brother was there as a freshman throughout my 5 years. I mean, it was just kind of a lower left to upper right kind of trajectory in terms of improvement in the program. And it just came to become like the expectation year in and year out became higher for the team and the individuals on it. I think in seeing Slay get to the finals in Northern Iowa my sophomore year. I think that was a big deal for a lot of guys on the team as well, because prior to that, we hadn't had an All-American on Penn's team for, I think, since World War II. So, I mean, it kind of seemed everyone was always talking about wanting to be an All-American and be a national champ, but to see him actually break through made everyone realize it was possible. And then everyone just you just kind of see a different mentality. So I think that was kind of just a natural progression.
Did you feel like you had the right amount of workout partners? Because today you just hear about these monster rooms and cream rises to the top. Did you have the guys you needed to sharpen your skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a tremendous coaching staff. I mean, Brian Dolph was huge for me from the point I stepped into Philly. I mean, he was a great friend, a great coach, a great mentor. Towards the end of I had all sorts of great coaches. I don't want to not mention anyone, but I mean, another guy in particular was Derek Mountsier. I mean, he came in when I was a fourth year, and he was basically a perfect size for me. And he was just a tremendous compliment for me and helped me help push me towards that next level. And then you just have guys like Rick Springman, Yoshi Nakamura. I mean, Glenn Pritzloff was training for to make a world Olympic team. You had a whole bunch of guys that were just all rowing in the same direction.
Your senior year, you meet a guy, Larry Quizzle from Boise State. He recently died. What does that do when your finals opponent passes away? I don't know if you knew him or not, but what was that like when you found out?
I never met him. I probably spoke to him briefly as we were waiting for our awards, but I mean, that hit home for sure. I saw that, and I mean, it puts things into perspective. I mean, that's 20 years ago. So, I mean, obviously I think a lot of us have moved on from that, but I mean, it's when you get married and you have kids and you your definition of what's important changes, as it should, I would think, and you think back to how important wrestling was when you were going through it, and how, yeah, I mean, it was kind of I get it, for a lot of these guys who are going through it from an NCAA perspective, this is in a lot of ways their life, right? So your heart goes out to everyone who had their NCAA tournament taken away from them, because guys train their entire life to achieve that dream of, whether it's just getting to the NCAA tournament, whether it's standing on the podium or on top of the podium, whatever it is. It's a lot of times it's the pinnacle of a guy's career that has the culmination of 15 years of hard work, so it's but as you grow older, you realize that it's not necessarily getting your hand raised on that third Saturday in March isn't really as important as you once thought it was. And yeah, when I heard about Larry Quizzle passing away, I mean, that was, sure, it hits home. It's terrible. So,
Of course, he handed TJ Williams his only Division I college loss. Do you remember just maybe being happy you don't have to wrestle TJ Williams? Does that thought cross your mind at all?
I mean, it's honestly, like, I don't know, my semifinal match, I won in the last 3 seconds, right? I reversed Corey Wallman from Wisconsin. I was winning. It was a very close match. I got reversed with 9 seconds left. There was like Barry Davis and Coach Rayner were arguing about riding time, because it was down to like the final second, and it was like there were 3 seconds left, and I'm sitting in the middle of how they set up the semifinals at NCAAs, right? Like, I'm literally watching while this other argument about riding time is going on. I'm watching the end of the Quizzle and Williams match, and it's like, and I remember just thinking, it's just I've worked too hard to have it end this way. And yeah, I got out. The whistle blew with 9 seconds left. I reversed him with 3 seconds left, and I had like a lower leg cradle. I might have pinned him if there was another 5 seconds, but that was about as excited as I've ever gotten after a wrestling match. But in terms of like not having to wrestle TJ Williams, my goal was to win the NCAA title. In a perfect world, I would have beaten him to do it because he had beaten me a number of times. Like TJ was obviously a fantastic wrestler. He lost once in his career, so sure, it would have been great to beat him. But I mean, you can only do. There's only so much control you have over things.
You talked about just perspective, but hey, being an NCAA champion is a big deal. And 20 years ago, you won a title. Does it still mean something?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely something that I worked hard for, and I'm happy it happened. But again, it's like as I've grown over, it definitively does not define me. It's I'm certainly happy I won. I'm not diminishing that fact, but I wouldn't consider my career a failure had I not gotten my hand raised in that last match. It would have sucked, and it would have hurt really bad. So maybe this sounds a bit hypocritical, just kind of viewing it from this vantage point, but yeah, that win doesn't define my career, in my opinion. And I think as I've grown older, that's why, like, just the sport of wrestling and what I think it does and builds, and the integrity and the character and the determination and all the lessons that the sport itself teaches you by going through the process and committing to that process. I think that's one of the reasons I try to give back as much as I do to the sport. So, I mean, and by that, I mean, like locally, I live in a town that's not a wrestling town in Chatham, New Jersey. We're trying to keep the sport alive here. I'm also the president of the Penn Wrestling, we call it the Grapplers Club. So it's kind of the alumni association for Penn Wrestling. And I'm one of the founding members of Beat the Streets Philadelphia. So there's a pretty significant focus on the sport of wrestling still in my life.
Talk about Beat the Streets Philadelphia and what kind of things you're doing. I know I'd like to just at least touch on Angel Garcia, maybe one of the great stories coming out of that. He's a writer and just really an example of what that can do for a young man and turn him into a really good wrestler. Talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, Beat the Streets, I think it was a movement that was started in New York with Al Bevilacqua and Mike Novogratz back in, I think, 2005 time, around that time frame. In mid 2008, my brother and I and three of our close friends, Ed McBride, Brian Hamlet, and Kirk Fuller, and we all grew up wrestling together in Delran, New Jersey. We decided to start Beat the Streets Philadelphia with one. It started with one program down in Camden, New Jersey. And for those who don't know what Camden's not, it's a town. It's kind of riddled with crime and has definitely underprivileged type town. So we bought. I remember I got an email from Johnny Johnson one day that Johnny he runs a wrestling school in South Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he sends an email out to a distribution basically showing a picture of probably 15 to 20 kids in Camden saying they're trying to start a wrestling program down here. They need anything you can send. Like, there's a picture of kids with no shoes on. They're all wrestling in socks. There's a beat up mat with those kind of fold out gym mats around each side of like a 10 by 10 mat. These kids their team colors were black and gold, and they were all wearing like a beat up, like green singlets that had been donated. So I forwarded that email to Clint and Brian, Ed, and Kirk, and we just decided to kind of, we got them 2 full mats, completely outfitted 50 kids, and from head to toe, and that kind of was the genesis. And that's something we realized we enjoyed doing, and it just grew from there, which has been a pretty cool thing, because you've seen it grow from that one program in 2008 over the last 11 years. We're now up to I'm going to say 30 programs and about 1,100 kids. We've done it very quietly. We're not, we don't really shout from the rooftops what it is we do. I think we're just trying to build as my brother says, a scalable, repeatable model. And we're just trying to alter life's trajectory for these kids. Cause like the way we look at it is like, if you start at point A, right, and you have two ships starting at point A and you put them on like slightly different trajectories, like one ship's going to end up here and one ship's going to end up here, right? We just want to put them on the path to success to kind of help alter their life's trajectory. I mean, that's as simple as I can put it. So for a guy like Angel, he's just someone that, I mean, he's just committed to the process, right? He fell in love with the sport of wrestling, but he also, it's not just wrestling down there. It's like a big part of what we're doing is mentoring, right? So commit to the mentoring program and you just start making the right decision, and all of a sudden your life, opportunities in your life change, right? I believe Angel has a full ride to Rider now, which is just fantastic, right? But it's not just the guys. Angel's easy to talk about, right? It's more the guys that I really get excited about are the ones who aren't necessarily winning a bunch of wrestling matches or going to PA states or placing in PA states, but the kids that are choosing to stay in school and not drop out of school and end up on the streets making all kinds of bad decisions, right? And I think there are a whole bunch of those kids. I don't know. I don't know how you put a price on that, but it's, I don't know. That's something that really drives a lot of us in this process.
Brett, if you could, we talk a lot about the values of wrestling, and you get a firsthand look at how it can change the trajectory. And you say, point A to point B, and you just slightly go a different angle. But can you dive deep into what wrestling actually does for these kids that might be unique from any other outlet on the planet Earth?
It just I think it changes your concept of work ethic, right? If you want to be successful in wrestling, it just doesn't work if you don't commit to the process, right? If you just try to half-ass it, it's not going to work. It's not going to be fun. You're not going to be successful. So to the extent you want to actually be successful in this sport, you need to commit to it. And that mindset, I think, just carries on to all sorts of different aspects of life. It's something that you can't teach it in school. It's just something that, you just learn through trial and error, right? And it's one of the quotes that was on Penn's wrestling room wall was like, the mind tires before the body. And it's like that concept, I think, is one of the most powerful things that I pulled from wrestling. And it's something that drives me today. It's something that all my kids know. I always tell them the mind tires before the body. And it's just something that learning what that actually means is a really powerful thing. And I think in a nutshell, that's kind of one of the main lessons that wrestling teaches you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, what are you doing now, and how does wrestling apply to what your current profession is?
I run a trading desk for a hedge fund in Manhattan. So I'm definitely not doing anything physical at work, but it's just the mindset and the work ethic. Again, it just carries itself. And it's, the integrity that you have to have. I mean, it's in wrestling, there's no cheating. Like it's just, you have to put the work in and get the job done. And it's kind of that mindset that I think can propel you to success on Wall Street or whatever profession you end up in.
Do you still stay connected with the Penn program?
Yes. Very, very. I'm the president of the Penn Grapplers Club, so I'm in regular contact with the coaching staff. I speak to Coach Reyna fairly regularly. I'm also on the board of the PRTC, so Brandon Slay is a great friend. I'm in consistent contact with him as well. So there's a lot going on down in Philly overall. We call it the ecosystem, right? It's something that we've built up over the last 10 years. And I like to think that, I mean, it's kind of, I don't think it's, I don't know that any other city can really duplicate what it is we're doing there. It's just between the PRTC, Penn Wrestling, Drexel Wrestling, and Beat the Streets. Like, it's just, the ecosystem is a very powerful concept. It's something that, like, yeah, I think it's kind of a concept that we've put in place. Kind of 1+1 is equal more than 2, right? It's like you get all these pieces moving together, rowing in the right direction. You have the Penn guys, the Drexel guys, all mentoring at Beat the Streets. They're learning the value of, like, how, of what it means to actually, again, kind of alter life's trajectory for an underprivileged youth. And they're realizing that, I think, there's more to life than just winning wrestling matches. And that's a powerful thing. And it's happening in Philly. Again, we're not shouting from the rooftops what we're doing. Anyone who wants to listen, we're happy to discuss it with them. But we're just trying to put our heads down and move the ball forward intelligently. And I think you see Penn with Coach Reyna back. I mean, that program's resurgence is apparent to me. You can see it in the recruiting classes. They continue to get stronger and larger in numbers. The PRTC, I think Brandon Slay's one of, if not the best RTC coach out there. I think he's focused on a lot of interesting stuff right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses over the course of the next few months. But yeah, it's interesting. It's, I guess, even in light of what's going on with the whole coronavirus. I mean, even with Beat the Streets, you kind of see the coaches see Coach Reyna interacting with the executive director of Beat the Streets, figuring out how we can help. And the executive director of Beat the Streets, Jim Mangan, we're not focused on trying to win wrestling matches right now, right? We're focused on making sure the families of our kids understand what these lending facilities mean to them personally, how they can access them if they've lost their job, how we can make sure these kids are still eating proper meals. I mean, this is all going on in Philly right now, and it's all kind of based around the sport of wrestling.
Is it harder to win at a Ivy League school?
I don't think so. I mean, I've thought about that in the past, and I think, like, I thought about, like, I would say the Penn team in the late 90s, and I've said this in the past, I think we were kind of a trailblazers in the sense that, like, I really think we were one of, if not the first team to really let the wrestling world know that you can go to one of the world's best in, like, academic institutions and still compete at the highest level on an highest, like, national stages, right? And Slay almost won twice. I won my senior year, and you've kind of seen the progression since then. For Penn, we had Matt Valenti win twice. Yoshi Nakamura was close. Rick Spring was really close. Matt Feast was a 3-time All-American. And obviously you've seen guys like Jesse Jansen won at Harvard, and Cornell's had a whole bunch of guys win, obviously. I think we've all, like, collectively, we've proven that you don't have to go to one of these Big Ten schools to get it done. And in a lot of ways, hell, I don't know. I think wrestling a Big Ten schedule, like, I'm old now, but it makes my body hurt. Those guys are killing each other every week in and week out. I think having I don't necessarily know that softer is the right term, but having a softer schedule throughout the season, or a more intelligent schedule, keeps the body fresh and reduces injury. And I mean, because wrestling season is long. You start talking mid October to mid March, like, that's a long season to just have your head down and crank. It's but sure, I mean, there's a whole element of having to go to class and getting good grades, and maybe that doesn't exist at all the institutions out there, but it's from that vantage point, I suppose you're making a more of a commitment to say like, yeah, I'm gonna get a great education, but you know what? I can still win multiple NCAA titles. And I think I'm obviously biased, but I think it prepares you. The whole process just prepares you better for life in general. So, and it all boils down to like my dad won 2 NCAA titles at Penn State, right? So I mean, and he was, again, as the story I told earlier, he was the first guy to tell me like, you have a choice. You're going to take like we're going to go this route. So,
Is your dad more of a Nittany Lion or is he a Quaker?
uh, the Motter family is we're fans of, like, we're obviously big Penn fans, but I'm also a big Penn State fan. I've again, the first place I ever went, I used to live in State College growing up, so the first place I ever went outside after one of the first places was to like the wrestling room. So it's yeah, I mean, I think they've done some tremendous things up there. We have good friends that are very involved in that program, so it's and I think they have a great working relationship, like the PRTC and the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. I think they have a great working relationship as well. So it's but yeah, my dad's happy to see Penn State win, but he's also a big Penn fan.